Hello, this is Megan Reed from Intrinsic Melodies, and today I'm going to talk to you about the power of two, which will help you practice less and achieve more. You are about to find out a new concept that will have you rethinking music lessons and practice. I'll be sharing with you an insight that I uncovered recently. I believe that if you take this insight and apply it, it's going to make a huge difference, not only in your child's music practice, but also in their learning in general. But first, let's talk about the current culture of music lessons. The current culture is this. Students go to their weekly lesson, and the teacher lets the student go, hoping that they will practice at home during the week before they meet again for their next lesson. Unfortunately, the reality is that the majority of students have a hard time or lack the motivation to practice after they get home. But it's not entirely their fault, as I'm going to explain later in my presentation. The minority of students that do practice regularly do the best they can, but I want you to know that there's a better way. The insight I'm sharing with you today will help all students practice better in less time, even the ones who are already practicing at home. Now, let's talk about the challenges that music students and parents face. So here are some of the challenges. Students don't practice, or their practices are lackluster. Maybe they only practice the easy assignments that are fun, or they just don't do what's on their assignment list at all. And the parents are so tired of nagging their children to practice. If you are a parent and have your child enrolled in a music class, you can probably relate to this. So what's going on here? Why aren't students practicing? Doesn't the teacher remind the students to practice? And does the studio have a certain requirement when it comes to practicing? Do the parents remind the students to practice at home? In fact, both the teacher and parents remind them to practice. But is it enough? Unfortunately, it's not. At Intrinsic Melodies, we tell our students to practice 5 days a week, 20 minutes a day. But it's not enough just to tell. So what do? We expect parents to do their jobs and have their children practice. And well-intentioned parents want their children to practice. But the problem is, students don't want to feel forced to practice. And another problem with practice is that students forget very quickly what they've learned in their lessons. Let me emphasize the last 2 points here. Students do not want to be forced to practice, and they forget quickly. The secret to practicing less and achieving more lies in these 2 challenges, and I'm going to reveal it to you in just a moment. But first, let's talk about what it means to forget something quickly when it comes to music lessons. This is what happens when students forget something quickly. If they forget, then it's hard to practice and they become discouraged. And if they are discouraged, then they're even less likely to practice. So, just how fast do we forget? Well, as it turns out, quite fast and in a very short period of time. In 1885, German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus did a research project on memory. Specifically, he wanted to find out how quickly humans would forget information after learning it for the first time. This is the result of that study. This graph came to be known as the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. It shows the decline of memory over time. As you can see here, in 20 minutes after learning, we retain about 58% of the information, a little over half. About an hour after, 44%, 9 hours later, 36%, and after a full day, 33%, and so on. This was a landmark research project because Ebbinghaus was the first to identify how fragile our memory is. Imagine, 1 day after learning something new, we retain only 33%, which means 67% of that new information is lost. To put it in perspective for us, from the time students get out of class, they start to forget what we just taught them rapidly. By the time they get home, a lot of information has been lost. And if they wait a day or later, or longer to begin their practice, they will have forgotten most of the new information. This is the reason why many students are lost and they do not want to practice, or if they do, they don't get the maximum results. This study has been replicated many times since with similar results, and the conclusion was unanimous. Information is lost exponentially in a very short period of time, unless we find a way to save it. And the way to save it is to review, and to review often. Every time we review, we bring the forgetting curve up, and therefore retain more of what we've learned. Does that mean that we should review all the time, every day? No, of course not. We don't need to. Studies have shown that if we space out our review time in a certain way, we can maximize our chance for memory recall. This concept is known as spaced repetition. So the real question is, how often and when should we review so that we can maximize our recall? This graph shows the best times to review for maximum memory recall. The first and best review is immediately after class. The second best review is 24 hours later, then 1 week later, 1 month later, and so on. This is how we beat the curve and retain the most information possible. For our purposes of piano lessons, I would like for you to focus on the first 2 reviews, or in our case, the first 2 practices, immediately after class and 24 hours later. I call this the power of 2 because I believe that this is the key to unlocking students' practice success. It is what allows them to practice less and achieve more. Practice 1 is practice immediately after class. Practice 2 is practice 24 hours later. These practices are important because we capture them in the most critical times. Of all the practices that your child is going to do, these 2 will be the most important and the most critical. Together, they set the stage for what's to come. If your child retains more of what they learned, they are more likely to practice after the first 2 times. This creates momentum and a willingness to practice more. The power of 2 provides a window of opportunity for maximum recall, so we want to capitalize on it. It is also most practical if practice is, quote, forced. Bear with me here because I'm going to explain to you how we force students to practice without them feeling forced. It's not enough to tell students what to do. We need to take them by the hand and force them to practice. How do we capitalize on the power of 2 and force students to practice? Introducing Intrinsic Melodies 2.0 Piano Lessons with a Twist. Your lesson plus the power of 2. Here's how it works. Students receive their formal weekly lesson and immediately after the class, stay online, muted to review what they've just learned, or they can log off and spend that 15 minutes on their own at home reviewing what they just learned. Then they come back the next day for 30 minutes of supervised group practice and on-the-spot tutoring. I offer these 30-minute supervised sessions 3 times a week. And students should, of course, come to the one 24 hours after their lesson for the maximum recall, but they are welcome to come to all 3 practices. So the total time per week that they can see me is up to 2 hours and 15 minutes. They have a 30-minute lesson, a 15-minute post-lesson practice, and up to 90 minutes of supervised practice. Here's why it works. We capitalize on the 2 most critical practice times to beat the forgetting curve and maximize their memory recall. And students won't feel forced to practice because that first practice is considered part of the lesson, just done right afterwards. And practice 2 isn't any different than a parent dropping off their child for soccer or basketball or karate. The group atmosphere of seeing other students doing that same thing and practicing makes it really conducive to really good practice. The bonus is that the second practice is supervised. I am there to help whenever students get stuck. something a parent can't always do or may not have time to do at home, I'm there to lend a helping hand. As a result, the practice will be much more efficient. I take them by the hand, no more excuses or confusion. The Power of Two provides a 1-2 punch for maximum results by watching over their practice and eliminating any problem areas immediately. When we eliminate any problem areas immediately, we nip them in the bud so they cannot become bigger problems. When that happens, the students remember more, and if they remember more, they feel encouraged, and if they feel encouraged, they're more likely to practice. So the benefits of the Power of Two piano lessons at Intrinsic Melodies are that students get lesson time and review time, plus they get a half hour of supervised practice the next day, and an option of 2 more supervised practices during the week. Our online piano lab is conveniently set up for all the practices. This provides a structured opportunity for students to practice and serves as a springboard that can create momentum during the week at home. And the number one benefit of the Power of Two lessons: if students put the Power of Two into practice and they spend just 1 more day of practicing at home, so the 15-minute review plus the supervised practice next day and 1 more practice session, it would be more effective than those students who practice 5 days of unsupervised practice at home, done after 1 day of the lesson. But there's more. Our Power of Two piano lessons also feature the breakthrough Australian-developed playing-based Simply Music piano method that allows students to play great-sounding songs immediately, and the Better Practice app that helps students keep track of their practice. Altogether, the Power of Two piano lessons, the Simply Music method, and the Better Practice app are 3 pillars that make us unique among our peers and allow us to get fantastic results for our students. If you would like to learn more about the Power of Two piano lessons at Intrinsic Melodies Music Studio, I invite you to come to one of our free introductory sessions and find out how we can have your child practice less and achieve more. Call our studio at 602-327-0493, or you could register online at intrinsicmelodies.com. Thank you.